I will assume responsibility for the entire inheritance. My oldest son, Alex, was rapidly transported to the hospital following an accident and tragically passed away. Despite being aware that he had been admitted to the hospital, Helen, Alex's spouse, failed to visit. However, she made her presence known immediately upon learning of Alex's demise, making a statement that caused me to smirk inwardly. I extended my sympathies to her, saying, "My condolences." In contrast, Helen's mother emitted a scornful laugh, unaware of the underlying truth. Her amusement was merely fleeting. I am Rebecca Reed, a 66-year-old retiree subsisting on a pension. My spouse, Mac, established a thriving business, which I supported discreetly. Recently, Mac has been ailing and lacks vitality. He ominously suggested that his time might be short. I dread the prospect of life without Mac, yet I acknowledge that we may have to part ways eventually. Mac's kindness and attentive nature have always comforted me, making his presence in my life invaluable. Our marriage resulted in the birth of our son, Alex. Although we considered expanding our family, no additional children followed after Alex. We devoted our entire affection to him, possibly indulging him too much, but he matured into a healthy and robust individual. Post-college, Alex secured employment, married, and, following Mac's advice, constructed a residence near ours to foster mutual support in times of need. However, Helen, Alex's spouse, posed a continuous concern due to her unusual demeanor. Mac initially overlooked Helen's negative attributes. Our first encounter with Helen was shocking due to her blatant impudence. She seemed to disregard basic courtesy towards us, her in-laws. Despite this, I attempted to dismiss it as part of her nature. Helen's criticisms of the house Mac was constructing for Alex were audacious, demanding costly changes and insisting we bear the expenses as a wedding present. Helen's demands left even Mac speechless. We eventually acquiesced to the renovations, with Mac covering the costs, appeasing Helen. The unexpected renovation work postponed Alex and Helen's relocation. While awaiting the completion, we proposed they stay with us, but Helen opted for a hotel, disregarding the financial implications. They resided in a hotel for 2 weeks at Helen's insistence, ultimately at our expense. Although I intended to support Alex, I found Helen's preferences disagreeable. Alex was amenable to living with us, but Helen was not. I urged her to reconsider because staying in a hotel incurs significant expenses. Although Alex seemed resistant to the idea of hotel living, Helen ultimately disregarded his concerns. I was concerned about the sustainability of their relationship. Previously an office employee, Helen had left her job to become a full-time homemaker upon marrying Alex. When we informed Helen that the renovations were finished, her expression was unmistakably dissatisfied, an odd reaction considering she was moving into her own house. Her discontent puzzled me until she expressed a shocking wish to live in a hotel indefinitely, citing the convenience of avoiding household chores. Helen confessed her aversion to domestic responsibilities under the assumption that I wasn't listening. While hotel life might have offered her comfort, Helen's lack of appreciation for the home Mac had generously provided was apparent. She seemed unable to let go of the comforts of hotel living. I mentioned to Helen that while hotels offer convenience, owning a home allows for more freedom and privacy. However, she merely sighed in response. Helen's attitude left me questioning our future rapport and whether she would mesh well with Alex. Nevertheless, given the proximity of our homes, I optimistically assumed we could manage any arising issues. When it was time for Alex and Helen to move into their new residence, we assisted with the move. Yet, Helen refrained from helping, claiming she did not want to damage her nails, and instead spent the time fixated on her phone, rushing us to finish before her favorite television show began. Mac, typically a serene individual, showed signs of irritation. Under Helen's influence, Alex diligently continued working without objection. Despite my frustration with Helen's behavior, I chose to remain silent, anticipating reduced future interactions once the move was complete. Following their move, our interactions with Alex and Helen dwindled, despite our close living quarters. We hardly visited each other, leading to a lack of family engagement contrary to Mac's initial hope for proximity. I sensed Mac felt more isolated than I. I encouraged Alex to visit, but he hesitated, indicating Helen's reluctance. While disappointing, I remained hopeful they would join us for the Christmas celebrations as the year drew to a close. I began preparations for the festive feast, despite the uncertainty of their attendance. I reached out to Alex, contemplating whether to prepare a meal for their visit, but received no response as he might have been at work. Reluctantly, I contacted Helen, only to be met with a shocking response. "Hello, what can I do for you?" she began coldly. "It's been some time. How have you been?" With Christmas approaching, I thought it might be pleasant to share a meal here if you're available. "I'm willing to cook for you as well." Despite Helen's initial brusqueness, I maintained a calm demeanor. However, Helen's replies were blatantly disrespectful. "Why should we spend Christmas with the elderly? Don't bring bad luck by saying such things. We have our own party plans. We certainly won't visit your home," she retorted, belittling us due to our age. Her words left me regretting the outreach. Apologizing for the intrusion, I acknowledged their youth and assumed they had other commitments. "If you're just considering stopping by, that might be feasible. Will there be Christmas gifts, perhaps financial ones? If there's a monetary incentive, I might think about visiting," she proposed cynically. The notion that her attendance hinged on receiving money solidified my unfavorable opinion of Helen. Not wanting their company merely for financial reasons, I opted for a quiet Christmas Eve with just Mac. During our holiday preparations, Mac suddenly suffered a seizure and was rushed to the hospital, rendering our festive plans insignificant. After a prolonged unconscious state, Mac succumbed, leaving a void in my life. The triviality of Helen's behavior paled in comparison to my grief. Upon notifying Alex of Mac's condition, he arrived at the hospital distraught, lamenting his absence during Mac's final hours. Helen had prioritized a Christmas party, causing Alex to attend reluctantly. Unaware of Mac's impending demise, Alex's grief surpassed mine. I regretted not urging him to visit the hospital regardless of the circumstances. Following Mac's passing, I was embroiled in the ensuing legal matters concerning his estate, which left little time for mourning. Eventually, Alex assumed control of Mac's business, demonstrating a knack for entrepreneurship as the company's value soared to $10 million within 3 years. Tragically, his life was cut short in a head-on collision caused by another driver's fatigue. The reality of the situation was unbearable, leading me to shed more tears than I ever imagined possible, a testament to the depth of human sorrow. I had braced myself for Mac's eventual passing, yet the premature death of Alex was beyond my comprehension. Upon hearing of Alex's accident, I hastened to the hospital, only to find Helen absent. Attempts to contact her yielded nothing but her voicemail, leaving me unreachable until after Alex had passed. Helen's absence from the hospital, despite her marital ties to Alex, was unexpected, especially considering I assumed she held some regard for him beyond our strained interactions. Days later, as I arranged Alex's funeral, Helen and her mother made an abrupt appearance. Confronted by Helen's lack of presence during Alex's final moments, I was speechless. Yet, she approached with a sly grin, immediately staking her claim on the inheritance, showing no signs of grief over Alex's demise. Instead of expressing sorrow, she was preoccupied with the inheritance, a stance echoed by her mother's mocking condolence. Ignoring Helen's cruel remarks, I focused on the funeral arrangements, distancing myself from her and her actions. Following the funeral, my resolve hardened. It was time for retribution against Helen for her mistreatment. Previously, Alex had expressed suspicions of Helen's infidelity. Acting on his concerns, I hired a detective who confirmed Helen's multiple affairs, contradicting her housewife facade. Despite Helen's belief that she was still the beneficiary, Alex had discreetly altered his will, naming me instead, following the revelation of her betrayal. He had contemplated divorce, but hesitated due to potential financial losses. His untimely death occurred amidst these tumultuous considerations. The day after the funeral, Helen began incessantly calling, likely realizing her disinheritance. Understanding her motives, I chose to ignore her persistent attempts at contact, feeling no obligation to engage with her. Helen's relentless calls continued, but I remained resolute in my silence, unwilling to entertain any dialogue with her. I empathized with her dismay, especially given that Alex's estate was valued at $10 million. Had Helen genuinely cared for Alex as her spouse, this predicament would not have emerged. Yet, Helen's self-centered behavior and disregard for her marital responsibilities ultimately led to her downfall. I had rightfully acquired Alex's estate and finalized all necessary formalities. Consequently, I resolved to respond to Helen the next time she persistently rang. Sure enough, Helen called shortly thereafter, prompting me to answer. "You've finally picked up. Why have you been ignoring me? Do you realize how many times I've tried contacting you?" she demanded. I couldn't resist replying with a hint of sarcasm, reflecting the reality of our interactions. Helen typically reached out only when in need, while neglecting my urgent calls. "What do you mean I'm not entitled to the inheritance? Is this some plot because you resent me? You can't just strip away my entitlement. That's why I've always detested you. I am the rightful heir, and you should ensure I receive what's mine. Otherwise, I'll take legal action," she threatened. I calmly explained that I was merely adhering to Alex's final wishes. "If you believe legal action is necessary, proceed. I've engaged in no deceit." Alex provided me with all relevant financial documents and account books to prevent any manipulation on your part, I stated, confident that her threats held no weight. After a period of silence from Helen, she unexpectedly called again. This time, she accused me of causing her financial ruin and demanded assistance, given the inheritance I had received. However, I understood the situation without needing further explanation. A private investigator had uncovered Helen's affair with a married individual. Alex had informed the man's wife, providing evidence of the infidelity, which led her to consider divorce and seek damages from Helen and her paramour. Helen's outburst continued. "I was merely enjoying myself, not betraying anyone, yet now I face lawsuits from 3 individuals for compensation. You must have informed the wife. She mentioned someone had tipped her off, and you're the only suspect." Helen's claim of being implicated by 3 different parties indicated she wasn't just involved with a single individual. Being sued by multiple people undoubtedly placed her in a tight spot. Nonetheless, assisting her was not my responsibility. It was baffling that, after everything, she sought my help. "I'm unaware of your specific situation, but it seems your actions led to lawsuits for compensation. I never suggested such a thing. Perhaps they misinterpreted your idea of fun as something more serious. It's not like I accused you of infidelity, but if it has come to light, then it's a result of your own actions. Admitting it was exposed essentially means your affair was uncovered, correct? It was Alex who discovered your affairs. You might want to blame me, but ultimately, it's your actions that are at fault. Do you grasp why Alex chose not to leave the inheritance to you? That's not fair. I was merely passing time, not engaging in anything serious. Losing $10 million over this seems ludicrous. Did you think I'd be pleased to see you lose out on such an amount? Why should I come to your defense, Helen? You caused harm to my son. Supporting someone like you is beyond my capacity. I pondered how you could remain so indifferent. Why would I defend you after you mistreated us and betrayed Alex? I owe no allegiance to someone who acts this way. I am indeed your mother-in-law, or at least I was supposed to be. Shouldn't we have strived to maintain our relationship? Yet, you've never respected me as a mother-in-law, only invoking the title when it suits you. I've reached my limit with your irrationality. We're no longer connected, so stop depending on me. I refuse to be associated with you any longer. I don't owe you anything. Please cease contacting me." Although questioning if my response was overly stern, I concluded the call. My intention wasn't to harm Helen initially. I had hoped to welcome her as a daughter since she married Alex. But Helen herself prevented any familial bond. It's unfair for her to now seek my support after consistently ignoring my attempts at reconciliation. Despite Helen's subsequent persistent attempts to contact me, I disregarded them, seeing no value in further dialogue. A few days later, while washing dishes, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. With no expected visitors, I suspected it might be Helen. Hearing a voice similar to Helen's, I chose to discreetly retreat to my room. I know you're inside. Ignoring me won't help. Return my money. It rightfully belongs to me, you thief. How dare you confiscate my daughter's inheritance? Come out immediately. Despite their accusations, I remained inside, avoiding confrontation. Shortly after calling the police, Helen and her mother appeared, clearly unwelcome. I stayed indoors, awaiting the authorities, as disturbances were heard at the entrance, possibly Helen damaging something valuable, such as Mac's cherished bonsai. Anxiously, I awaited the police's prompt intervention, and about 10 minutes later, they seemed to have arrived, requesting my presence outside through the intercom. As I opened the door, I observed Helen being detained by the police. I invited the officers inside and recounted my experiences with Helen, feeling a profound sense of emptiness as I spoke. I lamented not encouraging Alex to discern Helen's true character earlier, which might have spared him her betrayal and averted his unfortunate demise. Although I acknowledged the futility of harboring regrets, my feelings struggled to catch up with this acknowledgement. Take your time, the officer gently advised as I paused to gather my thoughts. Once I regained my composure, I completed my narrative. The officer, having heard the entire account, instructed me to alert them immediately should further incidents occur before preparing to depart. As I showed him out, I noticed the damage inflicted on Mac's bonsai and other belongings. I reported the vandalism to the police, who initially stated that such matters were outside their purview. Fortunately, I had installed security cameras at the entrance, footage from which I handed over to the authorities, never having anticipated their critical role in such a situation. Although I was the target, the destruction of Mac's treasured bonsai, a symbol of cherished memories, was particularly distressing. My resentment towards Helen intensified. Throughout my interaction with law enforcement, Helen and her mother were taken into custody, vehemently protesting their innocence and blaming me for ruining their lives. The arriving officers, recognizing the gravity of the situation yet unfamiliar with the full context, opted to detain Helen and her mother, particularly noting the significance of the damaged bonsai. They deemed it unsafe to leave them unattended outside my home and informed me of their decision. Following their detention, Helen and her mother were questioned by the police. Despite Helen's denials, the security camera footage was incontrovertible, leading to her being charged with property damage and consequently confined for a period. While her mother, merely present at the scene, faced no charges, Helen's actions had not only neglected her family, but also caused upheaval in other families and led to the destruction of property in my garden. Hearing of her impending accountability brought me some relief, reinforcing my belief that she should face consequences for her actions. The police elucidated that Helen's overwhelming debt stemmed from compensation claims by 3 men with whom she had engaged in affairs, contributing to her psychological distress. I found myself pondering whether someone genuinely afflicted with mental instability could express their circumstances so coherently. As the officer narrated the events, it became evident that Helen's claims lacked substance, resulting in her being formally charged. It appeared I would be spared Helen's presence for a while, a situation I decidedly preferred, desiring no further interactions with her. Moreover, it was revealed that Helen's mother had prematurely anticipated benefiting from Alex's legacy, even going to the lengths of acquiring a new vehicle and property. Now, with the inheritance beyond her grasp, she confronted the challenge of servicing loans on her modest income, burdened by her status as a divorcee without a support network, striving tirelessly to clear her debts. Over recent years, I have endured the loss of many loved ones. However, dwelling in grief was not a viable choice. Advancing forward was my only option. Initially, Mac's business was envisioned as Alex's inheritance, but his sudden demise left no direct heirs. It was then I remembered the senior employee Mac had esteemed, a loyal staff member from the company's inception, slightly senior to Alex. Mac had once confided, "If Alex isn't available, I trust him to manage affairs." Respecting Mac's intentions, I opted to bequeath the business to this trusted executive. Taken aback but acknowledging the necessity for leadership, he consented to assume control, pledging to honor Mac's legacy. This commitment provided me with the tranquility needed to proceed with the transition. Currently, sustained by Alex's inheritance, financial concerns are not pressing. Though not given to extravagance, I am resolved to apply Alex's legacy judiciously. Indeed, the prospect of managing such a substantial sum is overwhelming, necessitating prudent planning for the future. For the time being, my approach is to advance cautiously.